Sound of static abruptly cuts to the sound of heavy breathing, a beat of silence. You ever get that feeling? Like something ain't right? It's like a whisper in the back of your mind, a shadow that you can't quite see but you know is there. It's unsettling, gnawing at you, making the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Sound of children laughing and playing in the background fades in slowly. It was a bright, sunny day, the kind of day where everything seems perfect. The kids were laughing, their joy infectious, filling the air with a sense of carefree happiness. That's how it started for me. Just a normal day. Kids were running around, teachers were busy as bees, tending to their lessons, guiding young minds. The school was alive with the usual hustle and bustle, a symphony of everyday life. And then it hit. That feeling, like a bucket of ice water down your spine. It was sudden, jarring. One moment, everything was fine, and the next, it was like the world had shifted on its axis. My heart started pounding, my breath quickened. I looked around, trying to find the source of my unease. Sound of children laughing abruptly cuts out. The static returns briefly, then cuts to the distinct sound of a school PA system activating, followed by a high-pitched squeal of feedback. Then a woman's voice, calm but firm. The laughter stopped. The air grew thick with tension. The static from the PA system crackled to life, and then came the announcement. Attention students and faculty, please remain calm. This is a lockdown. The words hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. The calmness in her voice did little to ease the growing sense of dread. Everyone froze, the reality of the situation sinking in. The hallways, once filled with the sounds of life, now echoed with silence. The teachers quickly moved to secure their classrooms, their faces masks of determination and fear. The students, wide-eyed and scared, huddled together, seeking comfort in each other's presence. The world outside seemed to fade away, leaving us trapped in a bubble of uncertainty and fear. The minutes felt like hours as we waited, every sound amplified, every creak and groan of the building sending shivers down our spines. We didn't know what was happening, only that something was terribly wrong. The announcement had shattered our sense of normalcy, leaving us in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the next shoe to drop. And in that moment, we realized how fragile our sense of security truly was. Heavy breathing resumes, more intense now. Lockdown. That word sends chills down your spine, doesn't it? We'd practiced it 100 times. Fire drills, tornado drills, lockdown drills. But nothing prepares you for the real thing. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My heart was thumping in my chest. I knew, deep down, this wasn't a drill. This was real. And it was about to get real bad. Sound of heavy breathing fades into eerie, suspenseful music. Screen slowly fades to black. Eerie, suspenseful music continues. Fade in slowly from black to a still shot of a darkened classroom, light spilling in from the hallway through a window in the door. The atmosphere is thick with tension, the kind that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Fifth period. History. Mr. Johnson's class. The room was usually filled with the sound of chalk scratching against the blackboard and the low hum of students whispering to each other. Today, it was different. We were just starting to discuss the Cold War, of all things. Mr. Johnson was in his element, passionately explaining the intricacies of the geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. His voice was the only thing that broke the silence of the room. Sound of shuffling papers, muffled whispers, and the scraping of desks against linoleum as the scene slowly comes into focus. The students are huddled in a corner, hidden from view of the door. The sudden shift from a normal lesson to this state of fear was jarring. Irony wasn't lost on me. We were living our own version right there, huddled in the dark, scared out of our minds. The Cold War was about fear, uncertainty, and the looming threat of something terrible happening. And here we were experiencing those same emotions firsthand. The room was silent except for the sound of our breathing and the frantic thumping of my heart against my ribs. Nobody dared to speak. Nobody dared to move. The only light came from the hallway, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. It felt like time had stopped, and we were trapped in this moment of fear and uncertainty. Every second felt like an eternity. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each tick echoing in the silence. My eyes darted around the room, taking in the faces of my classmates. They were just as scared as I was. Even Mr. Johnson, who was usually so composed, looked worried. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. My hands were clammy, gripping the edge of my desk so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My foot tapped nervously against the floor, a small, repetitive motion that helped me keep my composure. Some of my classmates were crying silently, tears streaming down their faces. Others were holding hands, seeking comfort in each other's presence. It was a moment of shared fear, a bond forged in the crucible of our collective anxiety. Mr. Johnson moved quietly among us, offering a reassuring hand on a shoulder here, a whispered word of comfort there. He was trying to keep us calm, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He was just as scared as we were, but he was doing his best to be strong for us. The door handle rattled slightly, and we all froze. A shadow passed by the window, and my heart skipped a beat. We held our breath, waiting, hoping that whoever was out there would just keep walking. The tension was unbearable, a tight knot in my chest that refused to loosen. I closed my eyes, trying to calm myself. I focused on my breathing, in and out, slow and steady. I tried to block out the fear, to push it to the back of my mind, but it was always there, lurking, waiting to pounce the moment I let my guard down. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an hour. The clock continued to tick, a constant reminder of the passage of time. My eyes kept darting around the room, taking in the faces of my classmates, the worried expression on Mr. Johnson's face, the shadows dancing on the walls. We were all in this together, a group of scared kids and a worried teacher huddled in a dark classroom, waiting for the unknown. It was a moment that would stay with us forever, a memory etched into our minds, a reminder of the fear and uncertainty we had faced together. The sound of a cell phone vibrating, short, repeating bursts. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze, my blood running cold. It felt like an eternity before I worked up the nerve to pull it out. I could feel Mr. Johnson's eyes on me, but I didn't care. It was just Sarah, my little sister. "You okay?" the message read. I typed back, "I don't know." She was in the elementary school across town. Suddenly, this lockdown felt a whole lot bigger than me, than all of us. Section 3. Silence. The sound of eerie, suspenseful music is replaced by the sound of silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The silence was deafening. We were trapped, waiting for something. Then we heard it. A noise. Faint at first, but growing louder. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming down the hallway. They stopped right outside our door. Section 4. The face. The sound of heavy, anxious breathing. A long beat of silence. Somebody was out there. We could feel it, lurking. Then the doorknob started to rattle, echoing in the silence. It creaked open, just a crack at first. Then, wider, revealing more. A face appeared in the opening, sinister and haunting. The screen cuts to black as a man screams in terror. Section 1. The aftermath. The sound of heavy, unsettling breathing slowly fades in with a low, droning tone. The school was eerily silent, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. The hallways, usually bustling with the sounds of laughter and chatter, were now empty and foreboding. The flickering lights added to the sense of unease, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. It took a while for the shock to wear off. The gymnasium, which was once a place of joy and activity, now felt like a holding cell. Students sat on the cold, hard floor, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. The air was thick with tension, and every small sound seemed amplified in the oppressive silence. For the longest time, all I could hear was that scream, my own scream. It echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the terror we had just experienced. It was a scream that seemed to come from the depths of my soul, a primal reaction to the fear that had gripped me. The low, droning tone begins to pulse with a subtle, unsettling rhythm. It was as if the very walls of the school were alive, pulsating with the residual fear and anxiety of the students. The classrooms, once places of learning and growth, now felt like tombs, filled with the ghosts of our recent trauma. Turns out it was just Mr. Johnson. The blurry figure that had caused so much panic was nothing more than our history teacher, trying to get back into the building. In the chaos, he had been locked out, and his attempts to re-enter had been misinterpreted as a threat. He'd forgotten his keys and was trying to get back in. The sight of him fumbling with his keys, a look of frustration on his face, was almost comical in hindsight. But in that moment, it had been anything but funny. It had been terrifying. He hadn't heard the lockdown announcement. False alarm. The words false alarm were supposed to bring relief, but they felt hollow. The fear we had felt was real, the panic genuine. It was hard to simply brush it off as a mistake. That's what they called it, a false alarm. But the term didn't capture the depth of the experience. It didn't acknowledge the emotional toll it had taken on us. The concerned faces of the teachers, the trembling voices over the PA system, all spoke to the gravity of the situation, but it didn't feel false. Not to me. The fear was too real, too visceral. It had left an indelible mark on my psyche, a scar that would take time to heal. The anxious faces of my classmates mirrored my own feelings, a collective trauma that bound us together, not to any of us. We were all in the same boat, navigating the turbulent waters of our emotions. The worried expressions, the nervous glances, all spoke to a shared experience that had shaken us to our core. We were shaken, on edge. The sense of security we had once taken for granted was shattered. Every creak, every unexpected sound set our nerves on edge. We were like tightly wound springs, ready to snap at the slightest provocation. The experience had changed something, left a mark that no amount of all clears could erase. It was a lesson in vulnerability, a stark reminder of how fragile our sense of safety truly is. The haunted eyes of my classmates, the somber expressions, all told the same story. We had been through something profound, something that would stay with us long after the all clear was given. Section 2. A different kind of lockdown. The unsettling rhythm becomes more pronounced, turning into the distinct sound of a broom sweeping across a linoleum floor. Later that night, long after everyone had gone home, I found myself drawn back to the school. Couldn't tell you why. Maybe I was looking for answers. Maybe I just needed to feel something other than fear. The hallways were deserted, silent. The only light came from the moon shining through the windows and the flicker of the emergency lights. I could hear the echo of my own footsteps as I walked. Each one sent a shiver down my spine. Section 3. The janitor's story. The sound of the broom sweeping becomes more erratic, more frantic. That's when I saw him, Old Man Jenkins, the janitor. He was sweeping the floor in the cafeteria, a haunted look in his eyes. He looked up at me, startled. Then he sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "You feel it too, don't you?" he said, his voice raspy. "This school, it ain't right." He told me stories about things he'd seen and heard over the years, things that couldn't be explained. Section 4. The truth. The sound of the broom sweeping reaches a fever pitch, then abruptly stops. Silence. Then a blood-curdling scream. He said this school was built on top of an old cemetery. Said the souls of the people buried there. They never left. He said they could feel it most during lockdowns. Said the energy, the fear, it woke them up. He pointed to a dark corner of the cafeteria. "That's where they took him," he whispered. "The bodies." I didn't want to believe him. But as I looked into his eyes, I knew he was telling the truth. The screen cuts to black. I never looked at schools the same way after that. Couldn't shake the feeling, like there was something lurking beneath the surface. Years passed. I graduated, moved on, tried to forget, but the memory lingered, a dark cloud in the back of my mind. Then, my nephew Billy started high school. Brand new school, state of the art, supposed to be the safest in the county. They said it couldn't happen again, but I knew better. Some things, they follow you. It was a Tuesday. Billy was telling me about this new lockdown procedure they were practicing. They call it ALICE, Uncle Mike, he said. Alert, lockdown, inform, counter, evacuate. They say it's supposed to keep us safer. I tried to sound reassuring, but the words caught in my throat. All those years later, and the fear, it was right back there, clawing at the edges of my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tossed and turned, haunted by images I couldn't shake. Section 3, trapped. The pulsing beat in the music becomes more pronounced, faster, more urgent. A sense of dread builds. The phone rang at 3 a.m. My sister's voice, hysterical, screaming. "It's happening again, Mike. Lockdown at Billy's school. He's not answering his phone." I was in my car before I even hung up. speeding through the empty streets, sirens wailing in my head even though there were none. All I could see was that face in the doorway, all those years ago. The fear, the uncertainty. Section 4. The voice. The music reaches a crescendo, then abruptly cuts out, replaced by the sound of heavy breathing and static. The screen is black. The police wouldn't let me near the school. Nobody knew anything. Hours went by, an eternity. Then I heard it, a voice, faint at first, but getting closer. "Uncle Mike, is that you?" It was Billy. He was okay. The screen remains black. The heavy breathing continues, accompanied by the sound of static and a low, guttural growl that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Section 1. Relief and uncertainty. The sound of the low, guttural growl fades slightly, replaced by the sound of Mike Rowe's heavy breathing as if he's catching his breath. The screen slowly fades from black to a shot of his face, lit only by the flickering light of a television screen. His eyes are wide with a mixture of relief and terror. He was okay. It was another false alarm. Some kid messing around. They never caught him. But the feeling, that feeling I had, it didn't go away. It was stronger now, heavier, like a weight on my chest. I knew then that some things you can't outrun. They stay with you, haunt you. Section 2, a haunting reminder. The screen cuts to black. The sound of the low guttural growl returns, louder this time, closer. It seems to surround the viewer, coming from all directions at once. Lock your doors, they're out there. The screen remains black. The growl laugh continues for a few seconds, then slowly fades out, replaced by silence. After a beat of silence, a single sharp knock echoes through the darkness. Then, silence again.